The sound of arguing echoed throughout the house. They were so absorbed in their heated discussion that they had no idea the mother who had sacrificed her entire life to raise them was standing quietly behind the door, listening to every word. Margaret knew the family had been struggling with conflict for some time. She also understood that most of the tension and disagreements lately revolved around her. But the words that had just come from the mouths of the children she had once loved more than life itself were more than she could bear. In that moment, Margaret realized that perhaps it was finally time for her to leave. "Mom, what are you doing out here again?" Nicole parked her old motorcycle in the yard and called out to her mother-in-law. Margaret was bent over, carefully sweeping the yard with slow strokes of the broom. Hearing her daughter-in-law's voice, she lifted her head and tried to straighten her slightly hunched back before replying gently, "I'm just sweeping the yard. I'm not doing anything else. I've already told you, Mom. Just leave the housework for me and I'll do it when I get home. You're getting older now and your back is already bent. Don't push yourself so hard. I know you care about me, dear, but I can still walk around, so I don't want to sit still all day. If there's anything I can do to help you kids, then I want to do it. Besides, sitting in one place all the time isn't good for me. I need to move around and stretch my body." Nicole walked over to her mother-in-law, gently took the broom from her hands, leaned it against the wall, and helped her sit down on the front steps. "Mom, I bought this coat for you today. Try it on and see if it fits. If it doesn't, I'll exchange it tomorrow." As she spoke, Nicole took a brown coat out of her bag and handed it to her. Margaret looked down at the coat resting in her hands, then looked back at Nicole. "Why did you spend money on a coat for me? You already have so many things you need to take care of. You shouldn't waste money on me." "Don't worry, Mom. I have money. Besides, all of your winter coats are old now. They don't keep you warm anymore. I heard on the radio that this winter is supposed to be colder than usual, so I wanted to buy you a new coat to wear." "Thank you, dear." Margaret looked at her daughter-in-law and smiled warmly. Her smile was full of happiness, but there was still a trace of sadness in her eyes. She loved Nicole deeply. She knew her daughter-in-law was a kind and devoted woman. Margaret looked at her daughter-in-law and smiled warmly. Her smile was full of happiness, but there was still a trace of sadness in her eyes. She loved Nicole deeply. She knew her daughter-in-law was a kind and devoted woman. But life was still very difficult for Nicole and Ethan. Nicole was a community theater actress, but these days fewer and fewer people attended local stage performances, so her income was unstable. As for Ethan, he spent his days wandering around and doing nothing useful. Every expense in the household was paid by Nicole. On top of that, she also had to support her mother-in-law. From time to time, Margaret's son would even come home asking Nicole for money. Margaret understood how difficult life was for the young couple. They were constantly struggling to make ends meet, borrowing money from one place to cover debts in another. Yet Nicole had never once allowed Margaret to worry about anything. Nicole sensed what her mother-in-law was thinking, so she smiled and reassured her. "Don't worry, Mom. As long as I get cast in more good productions, I'll be making money again in no time. Then why doesn't the theater choose better plays to perform so everyone can make more money?" Margaret's innocent question made Nicole laugh. "Every actor wants a good script to perform, Mom, but those are hard to find. Besides, a successful production depends on many different factors. If every play were a hit, then all actors would be rich. And in life, whether a person becomes wealthy or not often depends on fate, not just effort. I feel so sorry for you. You're such a beautiful and kind woman. You deserve a happy life. But because of my useless son," as Margaret said those words, her voice grew heavy and her face filled with sadness. Ethan had once been an obedient son who listened to his mother and loved his wife with all his heart. But for some reason, over the past few years, he had completely changed. He spent his time hanging around with irresponsible friends, refusing to work and constantly demanding money from his wife. Not only did he fail to contribute financially to the household, but he also expected Nicole to give him money whenever he wanted it. Margaret had tried many times to talk sense into him, but he never listened. Worse still, he often raised his voice at her. "Nicole, do you know what Ethan actually does all day? I always see him hanging around with those people who never seem to do anything. Whenever I ask him, he tells me I don't understand anything and should stop asking questions. I don't really know either, Mom. He only keeps telling me not to worry. He says that one day he'll become rich, and neither you nor I will have to suffer anymore. He also doesn't want me to continue acting. That's nonsense. If you quit acting, what is he going to live on? What's wrong with being an actress? Ever since you became part of this family, I've come to understand your profession better. In this world, there are good people and bad people in every profession. I must be blessed to have such a wonderful daughter-in-law. I really love acting, Mom. That's why it makes me sad whenever Ethan tells me to quit. If you ever talk to him, please tell him not to force me to leave my job. All right, I will talk to him. Thank you so much, Mom. Nicole smiled and rested her head against her mother-in-law's shoulder. She truly believed it was rare to find a mother-in-law as kind as Margaret. Margaret treated her daughter-in-law like her own daughter, teaching her patiently and always standing up for her whenever Ethan mistreated her. Nicole respected and loved her deeply. Her father-in-law had passed away long ago, and Margaret had worked tirelessly to raise her children alone. Now, at an age when she should have been resting, she still spent every day worrying about her children. What time do you have to be at the theater today? Let me get lunch ready for you. Nicole glanced at the time and replied to her mother-in-law, I have to leave earlier than usual today, so I'll just have a bowl of instant noodles. When Ethan gets home later, you and he can eat together. All right then, go eat your noodles. I'll go to the neighborhood market and buy some pickled mustard greens. Ethan loves mustard green soup. Yes, Mom. Nicole quickly stood up and went into the kitchen. She cooked a bowl of noodles, ate it, and got ready to leave for work. Outside, Margaret finished sweeping the yard and then walked to the nearby neighborhood market to buy some pickled mustard greens so she could make Ethan's favorite soup. After finishing her noodles, Nicole went upstairs to get ready for work. While Nicole was standing in front of the mirror, putting on makeup and softly singing as she prepared to leave for work, Ethan suddenly returned home. He stepped into the room, saw his wife standing in front of the mirror, and immediately began clapping. Beautiful. Beautiful. But from now on, you're only allowed to sing for your husband. Nicole knew that his compliment was really another attempt to make her quit her job, so she turned around and teased him playfully. So that's your way of telling me not to perform anymore, isn't it? But why are you home so early today? You're usually not back until late in the evening. Ethan looked Nicole up and down and clicked his tongue in admiration. You're really beautiful, like an angel. Your long hair, your chubby cheeks, and those pink lips make me want to take a bite out of you. Nicole rolled her eyes affectionately and replied, What's gotten into you? Did somebody cast a spell on you or something? You never compliment me like this. Usually you're out all day, and when you come home you're always frowning and yelling. But today you're home early and acting happy. Something good must have happened. Did you win the lottery? You're too smart. Nothing gets past you. I'm happy today because I just hit the jackpot. I have a lot of money. Money? Ethan proudly opened his bag and showed her what was inside. And just as he had claimed, the bag was packed with stacks of cash. Nicole stared at them in shock. In all the years of their marriage, she had never seen that much money before. The amount looked as though it could equal a lifetime of savings. After staring at the money for several moments, Nicole finally regained her composure and turned to her husband. What kind of jackpot did you hit to get that much money? Honestly, I'm worried. I've never seen you doing any work. How did you suddenly get so much money? Seeing the doubt in his wife's eyes, Ethan smirked and lifted his chin proudly. Do you really think so little of me? Do you think your husband is incapable of doing anything? I'm smarter than you think. I earned this money with my own hands. Don't worry. From now on, we're rich. Take all this money and buy whatever you want, even expensive designer items. Tomorrow I'll buy a huge television, a new motorcycle, a refrigerator, an air conditioner, everything. I'll buy it all for you. Nicole began to feel irritated because Ethan still refused to explain where the money had come from. Tell me where this money came from. Did you win the lottery or hit some betting number? Seeing his wife continue questioning the source of the money, Ethan became annoyed. He raised his voice and snapped, I brought the money home for you, so just spend it. You don't need to know where it came from. All you need to know is that it's my money and I earned it myself. That's all. By the way, where's Mom? She just went to the neighborhood market. Good. Since she's not home, I want to discuss something with you. Ethan sat down in a chair and motioned for Nicole to sit beside him. His expression suddenly became serious. What is it? Why are you acting so serious? And why does it have to be hidden from Mom? Lately, Mom keeps interfering with what I'm trying to do. No matter what I do, she watches me and always has something to say. It's really getting on my nerves. But I don't want to argue with her, because if the neighbors hear about it, they'll think I'm an ungrateful son. So here's what I'm thinking. I want you to convince Mom to go live with Terrence. After all, he's the oldest son. Ethan, how can you ask me to do something like that? What you're really asking me to do is force Mom out of this house. Exactly. That's why I'm asking you to persuade her. That way nobody can say I chased her away. Just tell her to stay with Terrence. I'll still send money every month to help support her, so it's not like I'm abandoning her. You don't need to worry about that. The truth is that Mom and I don't get along. And besides, she's old now, she's forgetful. We're still young and we don't even have children yet. Having her here affects our private life. How can you say something like that? Taking care of our parents when they grow old is the responsibility of their children. You should be grateful that we still have Mom with us. Stop pretending to be so devoted. I know that ever since we got married, you've been putting up with Mom. Every night you lie next to me, but then you wake up because of her coughing. Be quiet. How can you say such things about your own mother? I take care of her because I genuinely love and care about her, not because of what you're saying. You're using me as an excuse to cover up your own lack of filial duty. If you want to force Mom out of the house so she won't interfere with your shady business dealings anymore, then just say it openly. Why do you have to keep dancing around the truth? You're my husband. Do you really think I don't know what kind of person you are? Seeing that Nicole not only refused to support his plan, but also deliberately exposed the way he was treating his mother, Ethan became furious. He slammed his hand down on the table and shouted, Are you even my wife? Why do you always take Mom's side and oppose your husband? Am I wrong? And now you're yelling at me too. Do you think I don't know what you're really thinking? Back when Maura first got married, you went out of your way to persuade Mom to sell her land and move in with us. You promised that you would take good care of her until the day she died. But now you've spent all the money Mom gave you from selling that land, and that's why you want to get rid of her, isn't it? Are you really a son? I never imagined you could come up with something so shameful. You're Mom's own son, yet you treat her this way. If she ever found out about this, how do you think she could go on living? Why do you keep making your husband sound like such a terrible person? That's not fair. Because Nicole had guessed exactly what he was thinking. Ethan tried to appear calm even though he was furious. He lowered his voice and tried to justify himself, explaining that the reason he wanted Margaret to move to Terrence's house was because of Nicole. But Nicole became even more angry. She told Ethan that she had never once complained about her mother-in-law, so he had no right to say such things. She bluntly told him that she did not want Margaret to leave and wanted her to stay there with her, so he should stop using her as an excuse to force Margaret out of the house. Hearing his wife's words, Ethan burst into laughter, a laugh filled with contempt. He rose from his chair and slowly walked toward Nicole. As he walked, he clapped his hands together mockingly. Bravo! Bravo! Moving closer, Ethan leaned his face near hers and whispered in a taunting voice, My wife truly deserves her reputation as a talented actress. You act so convincingly, but stop it. I'm your husband. Do you really think I don't know what you're thinking? We've lived together for years. I know exactly what kind of person you are. Stop pretending to be innocent, you old fox. Once Mom is gone, you'll be the happiest person in this house because you'll finally be free from living with your mother-in-law. There's nobody else here right now, so you don't need to keep acting. Drop the curtain. Take off that mask you're wearing. Stop pretending to be the devoted daughter-in-law. Listening to it makes me sick. Be quiet. At this point, Nicole could no longer tolerate her husband's arrogant attitude. Furious, she stopped talking to him and stood up to leave for work. Nicole, stop right there, Ethan shouted and chased after her into the living room. I said stop! Seeing her husband lose his temper, Nicole stopped walking. She turned around to face him and said firmly, What do you want now? I've already told you. I will not let Mom go anywhere. You've got some nerve. Now you're defending Mom and talking back to me? Mom is my mother. The decision is mine. If you stand in my way, don't blame me. I'm not trying to lecture you. I'm simply doing what is right as a daughter. And please don't force me to do something that goes against my conscience and my duty toward a parent. I can't do that just to satisfy you. You always have something clever to say, but you won't be able to stop me. And you know what? It's because you're like this that I want Mom gone even more. As long as Mom stays here, she keeps defending you, and that gives you the courage to talk back to me. I want you to go back to being a proper wife. So your true colors are finally showing, aren't they? After going around in circles, what you really want is for me to quit my job. Isn't that right? That's right. Taking care of her husband and managing the household is a wife's duty. For all these years, you haven't fulfilled that duty properly. Now I want you to do what a wife is supposed to do. From this moment on, you're my wife and you should serve me, not spend your life serving everyone else. Ethan, you're angry right now. We can talk about this later. It's time for me to go perform. I have to leave. After saying that, Nicole glanced at the clock and turned to walk away, but Ethan immediately rushed in front of her. His eyes widened with rage as he shouted, Stop right there! I forbid you from leaving this house. I'm sorry, but even if you don't want me to go, I'm still leaving. This is my profession, and I will never give it up. Nicole finished speaking, stepped aside, and quickly headed out into the yard. Ethan immediately chased after her. He grabbed the handbag from her hand, yanked it hard, and threw it to the ground. You dare disobey me? You want to talk back to me? Then take this. Furious, Ethan kicked the handbag with all his strength, sending it flying across the yard. The belongings inside Nicole's bag scattered everywhere. Seeing that, Nicole screamed, "Have you lost your mind?" Just as Nicole and Ethan were arguing loudly, Margaret returned home from the neighborhood market. As soon as she reached the gate, she heard her son shouting and saw him throwing his wife's belongings around. Alarmed, she hurried into the yard. "What's going on? Why are you two arguing like this?" Nicole ran over to her mother-in-law and pointed at Ethan. "Look at him, Mom. He won't let me go to work, and now he's destroying my things." Margaret looked at the belongings scattered across the yard and spoke to her son with a stern expression. "Whatever problems a husband and wife have, they should sit down and talk about them. You cannot smash things and shout like this. A person's job is not something they can simply quit overnight." After saying that, Margaret bent down beside Nicole and helped her gather the things scattered across the yard and put them back into her handbag. "You're already late. Go to work. If you're absent, the whole theater company won't be able to do their job." Ethan stood there watching his mother take Nicole's side once again. He became even angrier, but there was nothing he could do, so he swallowed his rage. His fists were clenched tightly. His face was flushed red. Even his lips had turned dark from anger. He kept glaring at Nicole as if silently saying, "You'll pay for this." Nicole was also frightened to see how angry Ethan was, but before leaving, she still walked over to him and said, "While I'm not home, you're not allowed to say anything that will hurt Mom. Don't turn yourself into an unfilial son. A person who fails in filial duty will never accomplish anything truly meaningful." After saying that, Nicole hurried onto her motorcycle and rode away. The moment she drove off, Ethan angrily pointed after her and said to Margaret, "Look at her. Just look at her. Doesn't she sound exactly like you? Every time she opens her mouth, she lectures people. Every time she speaks, it's all morality and life lessons. She doesn't even have her own life together, yet she keeps acting superior and teaching everyone else. Is anything she said wrong? Wrong? What's right about it? She learned all of that from you. You're the one who taught her to talk back to me and act superior to me. Have you ever seen a mother like yourself? You're always defending your daughter-in-law and teaching her to go against your own son. You're truly one of a kind. They should probably give you an award for being Mother of the Year." "Ethan, how can you say such things? Why shouldn't I? I'm sick of it. Do you know that? You never gave me any wealth or property. All you ever gave me were those useless moral lessons that make my head hurt." Margaret's eyes immediately filled with tears when she heard those words from her son. It was true. She had never left behind any wealth or property for her children. Now old and weak, she had nothing of material value to give them. The only thing she could do was teach them to live with kindness, integrity, filial devotion, and compassion. In her eyes, those values were the most precious things in life. Yet today, her own son was blaming her for exactly that. Perhaps this son of hers still did not understand the true value of those principles. All he cared about was money. He thought constantly about wealth and about finding ways to make more of it. Those twisted thoughts filled Margaret with worry. But what could she do? Ethan was no longer a child she could discipline. He was a grown man now. No matter what she taught him, he would only argue back. Today was no different. He was blaming her for always interfering with his business affairs, and he was calling all the values she had taught him meaningless nonsense. The thought of it broke her heart. As Margaret thought about the son who had gone so far astray, tears streamed down her face. She slowly walked closer to Ethan and spoke through her tears. "My son, your mother is poor. I have no money or property to leave behind for any of my children. The only thing I can do is teach you how to live honorably and not do things that go against morality." "Oh, stop it. If you couldn't give me anything worthwhile, then you shouldn't have spent all these years getting in the way of my business. Every time I try to do something, you oppose me. That's why I'm still dirt poor today. How can you say that to your own mother? I never stopped you from doing anything. I'm only afraid that you'll get involved in dishonest business and end up in prison. That's what worries me, my son. Why do you always curse me like that? Every time my work comes up, you start talking about prison. If you're so afraid of prison, then get out of here and stay out of my sight." Ethan hurled those cruel words at his mother without the slightest hesitation. He even drove her out of his house. After saying that, he turned and walked back inside, his face still burning with anger. Margaret remained standing in the yard. Slowly, she dragged her exhausted body toward the front steps and sat down in sorrow. Ethan's words had torn her heart apart. Tears streamed down her face, salty tears running along the deep lines carved there by time and hardship. She felt hurt. She felt sorry for her old, worn-out self. She had spent her entire life raising her children. Everything she had ever wanted was to give them the very best she could. For the past several years, she had watched Ethan spend his time with people involved in dishonest dealings, and she had worried constantly. She had tried again and again to stop him because she feared he would be led astray by those people and end up involved in illegal activities. That fear weighed heavily on her heart. Margaret had believed that her words of advice would help Ethan see right from wrong and find the correct path in life. Instead, he thought she was trying to stop him, that she was an obstacle standing in his way. That was why he had spoken such bitter words to her. And now he had gone so far as to heartlessly drive his own mother away. How had her life become so difficult? When her children were young, she had spent her days catching crabs and snails, going without food and clothing so she could raise them. Their happiness had always been her happiness. Her children were the greatest treasure she had ever possessed. She had hoped that one day, when they grew up, they would live happy lives. She never wished for them to become rich. She only wanted them to live meaningful lives, to be kind and filial, so that she could be at peace. But things were no longer the way they had once been. Her children now saw her as the reason for their failures. Whenever they suffered losses or setbacks, she became the person on whom they vented their anger. So what reason did she have to remain here any longer? Ethan was her son, the child she had carried, given birth to, and raised with her own hands. If even he wanted her gone, then she had no choice but to leave. Margaret wiped away the tears on her face and sadly stood up. She went into the house, folded several sets of clothes, packed them into a bag, and prepared to leave. From his room, Ethan looked out and saw Margaret getting ready to leave his house. He smirked and hurried out after her. "Mom is leaving, right? Just remember, you're leaving on your own. Don't go around telling people that I threw you out." Margaret looked up at her son. There was nothing in her heart except pain. She walked away with numbness filling her soul. As always, a mother's love flows only in one direction. No matter what Ethan had done, she still thought about him. She would go stay with her oldest son, Terrence, and if anyone asked, she would simply say that she missed Jalen and wanted to spend some time with her grandson. That way, Ethan would not be known as the unfilial son who drove his mother out of the house. Margaret left the house as evening was beginning to fall. Her lonely figure moved slowly through the narrow alley. Light from the houses along the street shone through gaps in the fences and spilled onto the road, illuminating her path. With every step she took, another tear fell. Suddenly, she heard the familiar sound of a song coming from one of the houses in the alley. The lyrics pierced her heart. A mother's love is as vast as the ocean, endless and overflowing. A mother's love stretches wide like the fields beneath the afternoon breeze. From ancient times until now, a mother's heart has always been the same. Yet how many children truly understand that? Margaret stopped and listened to the song until the end, before continuing on her way. Just as she reached the end of the alley, a sudden rain began to fall. It was an unexpected rain at the beginning of winter, making the already chilly weather feel even colder. She hurried beneath the porch of a house by the roadside to take shelter from the rain. Sitting there beneath the roof, she curled herself up and shivered from the cold. The early winter chill made her skin tighten, but it was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. Margaret looked up at the streams of cold rainwater flowing from the rooftops and could not help feeling sorrowful. Memories of her difficult life came rushing back to her. She and her husband had married when they were both 20 years old. They came from the same village, and both families were equally poor. After their wedding, they were given a place of their own to live. Her husband earned a living as a peddler, while she worked a few small plots of farmland and caught crabs and snails. Through hard work and perseverance, they eventually built a modest house on the land their parents had given them. Then their 3 children were born one after another, bringing happiness to both husband and wife. But when Terrence, their oldest son, had just turned 20, her husband fell ill and passed away, leaving her alone with 3 children. Overcoming the pain of losing her husband, Margaret raised her children by herself and helped each of them get married. Terrence married a woman who lived nearby, and his family became financially stable thanks to Monique's talent for business. Ethan was her second son. He was always intelligent and quick-witted. After finishing high school, he trained as a motorcycle mechanic and later married Nicole, an actress in a local theater company. Their life was not wealthy, but it was stable. However, during the past few years, Ethan abandoned his repair work and started pursuing other business ventures. No one knew exactly what he was doing. Margaret only heard rumors that he was involved in stocks or cryptocurrency. She did not understand any of those things, so she spoke to Nicole and asked her to persuade him to stop. But Ethan insisted that what he was doing was legitimate. Margaret kept hearing neighbors say that those things were dangerous and that people could easily lose everything. She was afraid Ethan would end up in that situation, so she tried to stop him, but he never listened. Every dollar he had was poured into those schemes. After Maura, her youngest daughter, got married, Margaret lived alone. Ethan came to her and repeatedly begged her to sell her land and move in with him. He promised that he would take responsibility for taking care of her. Trusting her son, Margaret agreed to sell the land. After the sale was completed, she gave all the money to Ethan because he promised he would use it to build a better future. But before long, all of that money was gone. Once the money was gone, Ethan began to see his mother as a burden. He wanted to drive her away so he could carry out his plans more easily. Many nights Margaret lay awake unable to sleep, thinking about her life and her children. She regretted trusting Ethan and selling her home. She had endured so many hardships throughout her life, hoping only to raise her children well and see them grow into happy adults. Yet now, at more than 70 years old, living one day at a time, her children still refused to listen to her. Even Maura, her youngest daughter, married Malcolm and then insisted on going overseas to work in Taiwan. Margaret had tried her best to persuade her not to go. She told her that she did not yet have children, and that as a woman she should not place too much importance on money. But Maura was determined to go. She said she needed to earn money before having children. So she left for Taiwan and left her husband behind. That decision also caused Margaret endless worry. She worried about her daughter living alone in a foreign land. There were so many temptations and dangers. Would she be able to overcome them all and one day return home to reunite happily with her husband? Margaret sat there lost in thought. The more she thought, the sadder she became, and the more she felt how old she truly was. She was old. She was powerless. She could no longer persuade her children. Her children were now like fully grown tigers. They had claws and fangs, and they were ready to use them against anyone at any time, even against her. She felt afraid of the power her own children now held over her. Going to stay with Terrence today was her last option. Deep down, she knew that Monique did not truly care for her either, but she had nowhere else to go. She had no choice except to go to Terrence's house. Thinking that, Margaret pushed herself up from the ground and prepared to continue walking. But the rain was still falling heavily. What could she do? If she stayed there waiting for it to stop, she might end up sitting there until nightfall. She decided to keep going. Holding her bag over her head to shield herself from the rain, Margaret had only taken a few steps when she heard a voice calling from behind her. "Mom! Mom!" It was Malcolm, her son-in-law. He was calling out to her. Margaret stopped and turned around. Malcolm quickly caught up to her and guided her back under the shelter from the rain. "Mom, where are you going in weather like this? Are you heading to Terrence's house? It's been a long time since I visited. I miss Jalen. Why don't you wait until tomorrow?" "Well," Malcolm's question left Margaret hesitant. She did not know how to answer him. Malcolm knew she was not telling the truth, so he quickly said, "You don't have to hide it from me, Mom. Nicole just called me. She was worried about you being home alone, so she asked me to come over and check on you." "Nicole called you? Did she say anything?" "Yes. She said Ethan was upset about something and she was afraid he might say something that would hurt your feelings, so she asked me to come see how you were doing. When I got there, I couldn't find you. I asked Ethan, and he said you had gone to Terrence's house to visit. I couldn't bear the thought of you being out in this weather, so I followed after you. Nicole worries too much. I'm fine. Ethan didn't say anything to me." Margaret did not want Malcolm to know that Ethan had driven her away. She was afraid Ethan would lose face in front of his brother-in-law. Even though Margaret said nothing, Malcolm could already guess that Ethan must have said something. Otherwise, there was no reason Margaret would leave at a time like this. He knew his mother-in-law was still trying to protect Ethan and did not want him to be judged. Since she did not want to talk about it, Malcolm chose not to press the matter any further. He simply said to her, "The rain is too heavy. Come home with me. Whenever you want to go to Terrence's house, I'll take you there." "How could that be?" "Why couldn't it be? You're my mother-in-law. I see you as my own mother. Maura is away from home, so while she's gone, I can take care of you. What's wrong with that? My parents passed away a long time ago. I've always missed having a mother's love. Bringing you home with me is something I've always wished for." Margaret looked at Malcolm and felt deeply moved. Malcolm was a filial man, but his parents had died early, so he no longer had the opportunity to care for them. He was nothing like her own children. Their mother was still alive, yet they constantly wanted to drive her away. Now that she was old, her children saw her as a burden. They could say cruel things to her without caring that their thoughtless words hurt her deeply. They were not like her. Everything she said and everything she did was always done with fear that her children might be hurt. No matter what happened, whether good or bad, she always thought about them and worried about them. No matter how badly her children treated her, she still worried about them. Just like what Ethan had done today. He had driven her away, yet she was still worried about him. She was afraid people would speak badly of him. And now, if she went to stay with her son-in-law, what would people think? They would say that Ethan and Terrence had treated their mother badly, and that was why she had no choice but to live with her son-in-law. She was afraid her sons would gain a bad reputation. Because of that, Margaret firmly refused to go home with Malcolm. Malcolm quickly understood what she was thinking, so he did not want to make things difficult for her. He took her to Terrence's house and then returned to his own home. As soon as Margaret arrived at Terrence's house, Jalen, Terrence's son, who was in 5th grade, ran out excitedly and called out, "Grandma, Grandma, Mom, Dad, Grandma is here." Seeing how happy her grandson was to see her, Margaret smiled warmly. She reached out, stroked his head, and pulled him into her arms. Grandmother and grandson pressed their heads together affectionately. Hearing their son call out that his grandmother had arrived, Terrence and Monique came running out of the house. When Terrence saw his mother, he hurried over and helped her sit down. He asked her why she had come over at this hour and who had brought her there. When Margaret told him that she missed Jalen and wanted to visit her grandson, Terrence felt happy and touched, but Monique did not feel the same way. The moment she saw her mother-in-law arrive, her expression changed from cheerful to irritated. Monique stood there with her arms crossed over her chest. Watching her husband and son gather around Margaret and ask about her, she felt her temper rising. When she heard Margaret say that she missed Jalen and had come to see him, Monique gave a scornful smile. Unable to hold back her irritation any longer, she looked at her mother-in-law and raised her voice. "Tell the truth, Mom. Why did you suddenly come to our house at this hour?" Margaret had been happily talking and laughing with her son and grandson. Hearing her daughter-in-law ask that question, the smile immediately disappeared from her face. Sitting in her chair, she looked up at Monique and answered awkwardly, "I had planned to come over this afternoon, but no one was home, so I had to wait for Ethan to get back before I could leave. It started raining on the way here, and I had to stop to get out of the rain. That's why I arrived so late. You've been living with your actress daughter-in-law for so long that you've started learning how to act from her too, Mom." Hearing those words, Margaret lowered her head. Perhaps she had not been able to hide the truth from Monique after all. Seeing his wife speak so disrespectfully to his mother, Terrence spoke sharply. "What did you just say? Mom can come here whenever she wants. She misses us and misses her grandson, that's why she came. It's not some major issue. If she's only here to visit for a few days, I wouldn't say anything. I'm just afraid she was thrown out and came here because she had nowhere else to go. Isn't that right, Mom?" Monique shot her mother-in-law a sideways glance and then turned and walked into the house. Margaret watched her daughter-in-law walk away, her heart filled with sadness. She knew that Monique had never liked her. That was also the reason she had never lived with Terrence and his family, even though he was her eldest son. When Terrence married Monique, Margaret knew that her family was in a weaker position, so she always felt somewhat inferior. After Monique became part of the family, Margaret was pleased to see how capable she was at business and managing the household. But there had been many times when Monique openly looked down on her. There had been several times when Terrence wanted to bring Margaret home to live with him, but whenever she saw the attitude of her daughter-in-law, she refused. She thought that if she moved in with Terrence and Monique, there would be no peace in the household, and the person who would suffer the most would be Terrence, her son. So she felt it was best to let Terrence and Monique live separately and comfortably. Whenever she missed Jalen, she would ask Terrence to bring him over for a visit and spend a few days with her. Today, Terrence had not come to pick her up, and she had arrived on her own in the middle of a rainy night, so Monique was suspicious. She believed that Margaret had not come because she missed Jalen. After Monique went inside and Jalen returned to his room to study, only Terrence and Margaret remained in the living room. Terrence sat down beside her and spoke gently. "What my wife said earlier was a bit too much. Don't take it to heart. That's just how she is. She says whatever comes to mind, but she doesn't really mean any harm. But Mom, why did you suddenly come over at this hour? Do you really miss Jalen that much? Or did something happen at Ethan's house? Did he say something to you?" "No. Ethan didn't say anything to me. I really did miss Jalen. That's why I came. As long as you're here, Stay as long as you want. Whenever you're ready to go home, I'll take you back. And if Ethan ever treats you badly, just tell me. I'll teach him a lesson. It's late now. Let me take you inside so you can rest." From that day on, Margaret stayed at Terrence's house. Ever since she arrived, Terrence and his son Jalen had been overjoyed. The two of them always wanted to come home early so they could spend time with her. In complete contrast to the happiness shown by Terrence and Jalen, Monique always wore a frustrated expression. She was constantly irritated. When she went outside, she yelled at her husband. When she came back inside, she yelled at her son. She also made sarcastic remarks directed at her mother-in-law. Every time Margaret heard her daughter-in-law scolding her husband and son, she felt sad, but she could only remain silent. She tried her best to do all the household chores properly to help Monique. She hoped that Monique would see that she was someone who cared about others and shared their burdens, and that she was not completely dependent on them. But it seemed that Monique never noticed those efforts. She still believed that Margaret had come there only to become another burden on her shoulders, so she always remained unhappy and displeased whenever Margaret was around. Today was Sunday. Monique left her store under the management of her employees and stayed home to rest. While she was resting in her bedroom, she received a phone call. It appeared to be from one of her business partners. After listening to the caller, no one knew what had been said, but Monique stormed out of the room and began shouting angrily into the phone. Jalen was studying in his room. When he heard his mother shouting so loudly, he quickly ran out and asked, "Mom, what's wrong? Why are you yelling like that? This year has been nothing but bad luck. And now it's like I'm cursed too. I'm going crazy." Monique looked at her son but did not answer his question. She hung up the phone and dropped heavily onto a chair. She still could not stop speaking loudly. Seeing that his mother kept shouting, Jalen walked over to her and said, "Mom, please keep your voice down so Grandma can rest. She's already sick." Monique was already in a bad mood. When she heard her son tell her to lower her voice, she glared at him and shouted, "This is my house. I can say whatever I want and do whatever I want. Don't you see how much trouble I've had to put up with in this house? And now you're telling me I can't even talk? You better be careful. Don't keep taking your father's side in everything. One day I'll make all of you go hungry." Her eyes widened with anger as she pointed directly at Jalen and shouted at him. Jalen was frightened when he saw how angry his mother was. He shrank back, but still quietly said, "I'm only worried about Grandma. She's sick and needs to rest. Don't mention your grandmother again. Every time someone brings her up, my blood starts boiling. Look at this. She was living with your Uncle Ethan, and then suddenly she came here to stay. She probably thinks that because I'm making good money now, she can move in here and enjoy an easy life in her old age. What she doesn't understand is that every dollar I earn comes from my own sweat and hard work. Money doesn't grow on trees. Why would you say that about Grandma? She isn't living here for free. Ever since she came, you immediately told the housekeeper not to come anymore. Grandma takes care of everything around the house. So how can you say she's living off us? What do you know? If she had lived with me from the beginning, or if she had given me money or property, I wouldn't say anything. But instead, she sold her house and gave all the money to your uncle. Now she's come here and expects me to take care of her. Do you think that's fair? And every time you and your father open your mouths, all you do is defend her. Mom, don't talk about Grandma like that. I feel so sorry for her. She's old. She hasn't done anything wrong. Sorry for her? You and your father are always saying you feel sorry for her. Then who feels sorry for me? Look at your father. He's useless. He can't accomplish anything. Every burden falls on my shoulders. When your grandmother came here, I thought she would handle the household so I could focus on making money. But instead, one day it's a headache, the next day it's back pain. In the end, everything still falls on me. Not only that, but I also have to spend money on her medicine. How am I supposed to put up with that? Mom, you shouldn't talk about Grandma that way. If you treat Grandma like this, then one day when I get married, if my wife talks to you the same way, won't you be angry too? You! Jalen's words drove Monique into a rage. She clenched her lips tightly and lunged toward him, intending to slap him. But Jalen quickly ran back into his room to avoid being hit. Don't you dare talk about your grandmother like that. You and your father are always defending her. Then who is defending me? You. Jalen's words drove Monique into a rage. She pressed her lips together and lunged toward him, intending to slap him. But Jalen quickly ran into his room to escape the beating. Monique chased after him for a few steps, but by then he had already rushed inside and slammed the door shut, so she stormed away and went outside. Margaret had not been feeling well that day. She was lying in bed resting. When she heard her daughter-in-law shouting and scolding Jalen, she intended to go out and stop the argument. But then she heard Monique talking about her, so she quietly remained seated on the bed. Even though she did not want to listen, her room was right next to the living room, so every word her daughter-in-law said struck her ears. Margaret did not know whether Monique was doing it intentionally or not, but her voice echoed throughout the house. Whether she wanted to hear it or not, she had no choice. Sitting there, Margaret felt her heart ache. Every word from her daughter-in-law was like salt rubbed into an open wound. Tears slowly ran down her cheeks. Why had her life become so painful? She thought that even if her daughter-in-law did not care for her, simply coming to stay in her house should not have been enough reason for her to speak such cruel words. After Monique went outside, Margaret quietly wiped away the tears at the corners of her eyes and stood up. Margaret walked out of her room and stopped in front of a small memorial table where a framed photograph of her late husband sat beside several old family pictures. She gently picked up the photo frame and gazed at his familiar face. Tears welled up in her eyes as she began speaking softly. "My dear, you have been gone from me and the children for more than 20 years now, but I know you are still watching over us. We shared so many joys and hardships together throughout our lives. Even though we are no longer in the same world, I still believe you can see everything that is happening to our family. Life has given us both happiness and sorrow." After hearing the things our daughter-in-law said today, I only ask that you do not blame her. Life is difficult now. Our children carry so much pressure and worry every day that sometimes they forget the responsibilities they have as children. From the day our children were born until this very moment, everything we have done has been for them. After the children have grown up, please continue living that way with me. Let us forgive our children so they can live happily and keep faith in life. My dear, please do that for me. Margaret spoke those words while crying. She stood there talking to the spirit of her late husband through her tears. Deep down in her heart, she did not blame her children for anything. The words spoken by her daughter-in-law had saddened her somewhat, but she thought that Monique was probably under tremendous pressure from the burdens of daily life and money, and that was why she spoke so harshly. Margaret always thought about her children. She was generous and forgiving, always ready to pardon their mistakes. While Margaret was still standing before her husband's altar, Monique came in from outside. Seeing her there, she asked in an irritated voice, "What are you doing now, Mom?" Startled by the question and afraid her daughter-in-law would notice she had been crying, Margaret lowered her head and quickly wiped away her tears before answering awkwardly, "Oh, I was just cleaning your father's memorial altar. Oh, please, you're sick, so just stay put and rest. Otherwise, when your son comes home and sees this, he'll say I'm mistreating you." "I'm fine. Really, I'm feeling much better now. You're feeling better already? Well, that's good. In that case, I'd like to talk to you about something." "What is it, dear?" "Go ahead and tell me. Sit down first, and then I'll explain." "All right, go ahead." Margaret did not sit down. She continued wiping the altar while listening to her daughter-in-law. "Mom, I don't know what happened between you and Ethan's family before you came here, or why you left their house and came to ours. All I know is that ever since you moved in here, my business has started losing money. You may not feel anything, but I'm very worried about it. Do you remember our wedding day? You took me to see a fortune teller. The fortune teller said that our ages were incompatible and that we should not live under the same roof. So if you truly care about your son and your grandson, you should think carefully about what is best for everyone. I don't understand what you're trying to say. If you have something to say, just say it directly. I want you to make the decision yourself. If I say it openly, it won't sound good. And if people hear about it, they'll say that the daughter-in-law chased her mother-in-law out of the house. That would only give me a bad reputation." Just then, Terrence came home. When he saw that his mother was still sick yet had come outside to do housework, he hurried over and asked, "Mom, you're not feeling well. Why are you out here doing this? Leave these small chores to Jalen. He's old enough now." Terrence took the cleaning cloth from his mother's hand, set it aside, helped her sit down in a chair, and then turned toward his wife. "And you've been home this whole time, yet you're letting Mom work while she's sick?" As soon as Monique heard her husband criticizing her, she immediately raised her voice. "There, do you see that? I told her not to do it, but she wouldn't listen. Now your son is accusing me of making her work. He's blaming me and making me look bad. Are you happy now?" Monique pouted as she spoke. The expression on her face made Terrence's blood boil. He shouted angrily, "Shut your mouth! How dare you talk to Mom like that?" Even after being shouted at by her husband, Monique showed no shame. She placed her hands on her hips, pushed out her chest, lifted her chin, and challenged him. That's exactly how I talk. What are you going to do about it? You feel sorry for your mother, don't you? Then take her and leave. I've had enough of this. Shut your mouth. How dare you be so disrespectful? I'll teach you a lesson right now. Furious, Terrence rushed toward his wife, but Monique showed no fear at all. She kept her chin raised high in defiance. Seeing that her son was about to hit his wife, Margaret became terrified. She quickly grabbed Terrence's arm and pulled him back while pleading, "Terrence, I'm begging you." Seeing her mother-in-law crying and begging her son not to hit her, Monique became even more aggressive. "You don't need to pretend to feel sorry for me. Let go of him, and let's see what he can do to me. Let me remind you of something, Terrence, in case you've forgotten. When you married me, you had absolutely nothing. Not a penny to your name. Your mother didn't give you a single dollar. Everything we have came from my parents. This house is what it is today because I worked for it and built it with my own hands. What exactly have you ever done? And now you think you can act superior to me? If you're not careful, I'll throw you out." Terrence slapped his wife across the face with all his strength, knocking her back into a chair. Margaret burst into tears and ran over to pull her son away. "Terrence, please. I'm begging you. Mom, stay out of it. Today I have to teach her a lesson. She's become too arrogant. She's gone too far." Margaret released her grip on her son and hurried over to Monique. She grabbed her daughter-in-law's hand and asked anxiously, "Monique, are you all right?" "Let go of me." Monique violently shook Margaret's hand away. "Are you satisfied now? Your son hit me. Is that what you wanted?" After shouting those words at her mother-in-law, Monique jumped to her feet. Then she began spewing cruel words toward Margaret. She said that Margaret was the reason her business was losing money and the reason she and Terrence were fighting. She openly declared that she would no longer allow Margaret to stay in her house. According to Monique, Margaret had already given all the money from selling her land and home to Ethan and Nicole, so the responsibility of caring for her belonged to them, not to Monique. And if Margaret did not leave the house today, then Monique would. After making that declaration, Monique quickly stormed out of the house. When Margaret heard her daughter-in-law say that she would leave home, she became terrified. She was afraid that if Monique really left, what would happen to her son and grandson? Having no other choice, Margaret wiped away her tears, silently stood up, went into her room, and began packing her clothes. She decided to leave. Terrence and Jalen desperately tried to stop her. Jalen clung to his grandmother and cried, "Grandma, please don't go. Don't you care about Dad and me anymore? I care about your father and I care about you very much. That's exactly why I have to leave. I don't want your family to fall apart." "But Grandma, where will you go?" "Don't worry about me. I'll stay with Malcolm for a while. Don't do anything foolish because of me. In a few days, when your mother calms down, make peace with her. All my life, I have never had anything to leave my children. I was born poor, I grew up poor, and now that I am old, I am still poor. I have nothing to leave any of you except my love and my sacrifices. So today I choose to leave because of you. This is the final sacrifice I can make for you. This is all I have left to give. So please protect your happiness. I hope you will live well and live a meaningful life. I am leaving now. I will come back and visit you and Jalen from time to time. Don't worry about me. I'm leaving now. Goodbye, Jalen. Mom, I'm sorry. Please forgive your unfilial son." Terrence cried as he dropped to his knees before his mother. He felt completely helpless. The pain of seeing himself unable to protect his mother, watching his wife force her out of the house while he could do nothing, tore him apart. He felt like a weak man and an unfilial son. All he could do was kneel before his mother and beg for her forgiveness. Margaret took hold of her son's hand and helped him to his feet. Then she picked up her bag and slowly walked out of her daughter-in-law's house, feeling as though someone were rubbing salt into an open wound. Perhaps no one else had ever fallen into circumstances as bitter as hers. First her son drove her away, and now her daughter-in-law had done the same. She had raised her children hoping that one day they would repay her love and devotion, but the fruit she received in the end was painfully bitter. Wiping away her tears, Margaret walked forward in agony. Jalen ran after her crying and wrapped his arms around her legs, begging her not to leave, but he could not persuade her to stay. In the end, he slowly let go and stood there watching his grandmother's figure disappear beyond the gate. Margaret said she would go stay at her son-in-law's house so Terrence would not worry, but in truth she did not have the face to go to Malcolm's house. Both of her sons were still alive and healthy, yet she would be living with her son-in-law. What would people think? They would say she had failed to raise her sons properly. And what would Malcolm think of his wife's two brothers? Margaret believed that when one person's reputation suffers, it affects the whole family. She wanted to hide the fact that she had been driven out because it was not something honorable. She did not want anyone to know so they could laugh at her or at her children. She was always afraid that her children would be criticized or lose face, yet her children had never once thought about her. They only saw her as a burden and wanted to push her away whenever they could. How bitter it was for a mother like her. After leaving her daughter-in-law's house, Margaret did not go to Malcolm's home. Instead, she wandered aimlessly down the road. She had no idea where she was going. She simply kept walking without a destination. By late afternoon, the sky was clear and bright. It was not gloomy like the cold winter days that had come before. Crowds of people hurried home, one after another, yet she alone had no home to return to. The streets were busy and full of life, but she felt completely alone. She had children and grandchildren, yet now she was by herself, like a homeless person. What a bitter life it was. She walked and walked until the weak winter sunlight finally disappeared. Exhausted, she sat down beneath a tree by the roadside. Closing her aged eyes lined with wrinkles, Margaret thought to herself that perhaps she would have to sleep there that night. Leaning against the tree trunk, she let out a weary sigh and closed her eyes tightly. How she wished that time could turn back the moment she closed them. She wanted to live forever in the days of her youth. Life had been difficult then, but it had also been happy. Her children had been innocent, carefree, and obedient. They were nothing like they were now. They had grown up and enjoyed comfortable lives, yet they had forgotten the mother who had worked so hard to raise them and sacrificed her entire life for them. Later that afternoon, after Margaret left, Jalen became increasingly worried about her. He secretly went to Malcolm's house to see whether she was there. When he discovered that she had never arrived, he told Malcolm everything that had happened. After hearing everything Jalen told him, Malcolm panicked and rushed out on his motorcycle to search for his mother-in-law. It was not until late that evening that he finally found Margaret and brought her home with him. From the day Margaret moved into Malcolm's house, he took good care of her and treated her like his own mother. He believed that since his wife was away, caring for his mother-in-law was his responsibility. He would take care of her in Maura's place until the day she returned. He hoped that when Maura came home, she would be touched by his devotion and love him even more. Seeing how attentively Malcolm cared for her, Margaret silently thanked him. She also looked forward to the day her daughter returned so that she and Malcolm could be reunited and happy together. After Margaret moved into Malcolm's house, Nicole would occasionally find time to visit her and bring small gifts. Since she could not persuade Ethan to bring his mother home, she could only silently carry the guilt of failing her mother-in-law. The only way she could show her filial respect now was through words of encouragement and the small gifts she brought. Terrence lived not far from Malcolm's house, so he and Jalen would come by from time to visit Margaret. Sometimes Jalen even came alone to spend time with his grandmother. The only one who never asked about Margaret was Monique. Ever since she succeeded in driving her mother-in-law away, she had been delighted, feeling as though she had finally gotten rid of a burden. But whenever she saw Terrence and Jalen going to visit Margaret, she became visibly irritated. One time Jalen secretly went to see his grandmother and Monique found out. She beat him for it. She was afraid that Terrence and Jalen would go there and speak badly about her in front of Margaret, so she forbade them from visiting. But her orders changed nothing. Whenever Monique was not home, Terrence would take Jalen over to visit his mother. Today, Terrence was away, and Jalen got out of school early, so he immediately ran over to Malcolm's house to spend time with his grandmother. The two of them happily chatted together until Malcolm came home from work. Seeing Malcolm, Jalen excitedly called out, "Uncle Malcolm! Hey, Jalen, you came to visit Grandma?" "Yes, Uncle Malcolm, there's something I need to tell you." As he spoke, Jalen pulled Malcolm aside. "What is it? Some kind of secret?" "It is a secret, Uncle. Mom said I wasn't allowed to tell you, but I think you need to know." "What happened that's so serious?" "Aunt Maura came back." "What? Aunt Maura came back?" "Maura came back? Then why don't I know about it?" "Why hasn't she come home? She went to our house, and she brought a man with her too. I heard he's her boyfriend." "What did you just say? Maura came back and she brought another man with her?" Jalen nodded repeatedly to confirm it. Hearing Jalen's words, Malcolm felt as though his heart had stopped. Could what Jalen was saying really be true? Had Maura really come back? Why hadn't she told him anything? And who was the man she had come back with? What was going on? How could this be happening? Malcolm's mind spun with questions. For a long time now, ever since his wife left for Taiwan, and especially recently when their phone calls had become fewer and farther between, he had sensed that something bad was coming. But he never imagined it would turn out to be true. After a long moment of shock, Malcolm forced himself to calm down. He tried to act as though nothing was wrong in front of Jalen. Only after the boy had gone home did Malcolm sit alone in the house and cry. Tears rolled down the face of a man who was about to lose the woman he loved most. He regretted letting Maura go overseas all those years ago. If only he had been more determined back then, perhaps things would not have ended this way. What should he do now? Should he find Maura and demand an explanation? Or should he find the man who had stolen his family's happiness and teach him a lesson? No. If all of this was true, then Maura was the one who had done wrong. He wanted her to return and admit it to his face. If she no longer loved him and wanted a divorce, then she needed to tell him clearly. She had to give him a proper explanation. 2 days later, while Malcolm was at home and Margaret had gone to the market, Terence came by. He handed Malcolm a stack of money and said, "Malcolm, I'm ashamed of myself. I'm an unfilial son. I have a mother but can't even take care of her. So I'm giving you this money as a token of my sincerity to help you look after my mother." "Terence, why are you doing this?" "I've always considered Mom to be my own mother, so please take this money back. As long as she's living with me, I'll take good care of her. I don't need this money." "No, take it. Please accept it so I can feel a little less ashamed. Please understand. It's not that I wanted to abandon Mom. The truth is, seeing her stay at your house hurts me deeply. But right now, I'm a man living under my wife's roof, a man dependent on his wife. I can't do anything. I don't even have authority as a husband. So how can I talk about fulfilling my duty as a son?" As Terence said those words, tears streamed down his face. He felt humiliated and miserable. As a man dependent on his wife, the thing he regretted most in life was accepting too much help from his in-laws from the very beginning. Now he was trapped. He lived like a man hiding under someone else's roof, not daring to speak up in front of his wife. He himself had turned into a weak and pathetic man. "Terence, go home. Take this money back. If Monique finds out, Mom will only be hurt even more. I may not be rich, but I will take good care of her. Don't worry." Malcolm firmly refused to accept Terence's money. Although Malcolm knew that he and Maura might not remain together much longer and that they might eventually divorce, before everything became clear, he still wanted to be a good son and fulfill his responsibilities to both sides of the family. As for Terence, although he already knew that his sister had returned and had brought another man with her, he had not yet told Malcolm. He wanted to talk to his sister first and try to change her mind. Malcolm was a good man. He did not want his sister to betray someone like him. After returning home, Terence told Maura that their mother was being cared for by Malcolm, and he hoped she would reconsider her relationship. He begged her not to do something she would regret later by betraying a husband like Malcolm. When Maura heard that Malcolm was taking care of their mother, she was deeply moved. But she said that her feelings for Malcolm were gone, and that she would divorce him in order to marry another man. 2 days later, Maura planned to go see Malcolm herself, tell him that she had returned, and take her mother back home. Unable to stop his sister, Terence had no choice but to let Maura make her own decision. And just as Maura had said, 2 days later she came to Malcolm's house. Since his wife had called ahead and told him she was coming, Malcolm stayed home waiting for her. He took the initiative to arrange for them to meet and talk somewhere outside because he did not want Margaret to overhear anything. He was afraid it would break her heart. More than anything else, he wanted to speak honestly with Maura before it was too late, hoping that he could still save the marriage that was standing on the edge of a cliff. At a small park in Baltimore, where they had agreed to meet, Malcolm arrived first and waited for his wife. Maura arrived on time as well, taking a taxi to meet him. When she got there, she slowly stepped out of the taxi and walked toward Malcolm. She was wearing a fitted blue dress that hugged her waist and made her look quite attractive. Her hair had been curled and dyed blonde. Her makeup was bold and striking. Malcolm stared at his wife as she stepped out of the car, hardly believing his eyes. Was that really his wife? She had changed so much. She was no longer the simple, modest woman she once was. Time and distance had transformed Maura into a completely different person. And when a person changes, perhaps it is no surprise that their feelings change as well. When she reached him, Maura gave Malcolm a bright smile and asked, "Malcolm, how have you been?" The question sounded more like something a friend would ask. There was no excitement, no longing, and no trace of affection hidden behind it. Faced with that distant attitude from his wife, Malcolm could only force a painful smile. "Thank you. I've been fine. At least my body has. But my heart is hurting." "Why am I hurting?" "You don't know why I'm hurting?" "I don't think that's something worth hurting over. During all the years we spent apart, I realized something. You and I are not right for each other. While I was living overseas, I found someone who is right for me. and I did something wrong to you. Now that I've come back, I want us to end things here. You should go and find your own happiness." Mora, after all these years together, after all the promises we made, after living as if we couldn't exist without each other, how can you talk about ending everything so easily? I admit you're right. We did make promises. We did swear we would never leave each other, but that was in the past. Things are different now. I'm not the Mora I used to be. Now I have money, I have a future, and I have a wealthy man who loves me and takes care of me. What do you have besides that rundown house? Mora, how can you say something like that? I may not have money, but I have a heart. I have love for you. Don't let material things make you forget everything we shared. You were the one who told me we just needed to work hard together. You said that if you went overseas for a few years, we would be reunited and live happily together. So what happened? While I remained faithful and waited for you all these years, you found another man? Are you finished? If you're finished, then let me tell you something. I don't have time to go back and forth about this with you. I don't love you anymore, so I want you to let me go. This is the divorce agreement. I've already prepared it. Sign it. Then I'll go pick up my mother. Thank you for taking care of her during this time. Here's some money. Take it and consider it a token of my gratitude for looking after my mother and compensation for the years of your youth that you spent waiting for me. I hope you won't think it's too little. Mora spoke as she took a stack of cash from her handbag and held it out in front of Malcolm. Ever since hearing Mora say that she no longer had any feelings for him, Malcolm had sat there like a man who had lost his soul. He had intended to let her finish speaking and then try to explain things to her so she would understand that they still loved each other and that her feelings for the other man were only temporary. But when he saw Mora offering him the money and saying it was payment for him, he felt that perhaps the love between them had truly come to an end. Giving him that money meant she now considered him an outsider. They had once been husband and wife, had lived together and shared everything, but now she treated him like a stranger. What was left for him to hold on to anymore? If Mora no longer loved him, then why should he keep holding on? Malcolm quickly shifted from heartbreak to anger. He took the divorce papers from Mora's hand and signed them with one swift stroke of the pen. Malcolm had signed the divorce papers. He felt that there was nothing left between him and Mora worth holding on to anymore. He would set her free so she could go and find a new happiness. After Malcolm had signed the divorce papers, Mora quickly returned to his house to pick up her mother. Malcolm immediately followed her. He was afraid she would tell Margaret everything and break her heart. When they arrived at the house, Mora told her mother that she was going to take her to live with her in another home. Margaret was confused by that and asked about it, so Mora was forced to tell the truth. She had another man, and she and Malcolm were going to separate. After hearing Mora say that, Margaret could not believe it. She turned to Malcolm and asked if it was true. Malcolm remained silent and did not answer. Looking at the sadness on her son-in-law's face, Margaret immediately understood that it was true. She slowly walked over to Malcolm, gently patted him on the shoulder, and said, "Malcolm, if someone has been unfaithful to you, then why should you be sad? Why should you regret losing a woman who betrayed you? Mom, why are you saying that about me? Do you care more about him than me? I came here to take you with me. From now on, you won't have to stay in his house anymore," Mora cried as she said that to her mother. Mora did not expect that after hearing the news that she and Malcolm were separating, Margaret would take his side and scold her like this. She was Margaret's own daughter, yet Margaret was openly standing with her son-in-law. "Mora, now that you've come home, your mother should have been happy, but I never expected you to do something this terrible. All these years I have taught my children to live with loyalty and gratitude. How could you do something so shameful today? Malcolm, I am sorry for not raising my daughter properly. She has wronged you. I bow my head and apologize to you. I gave birth to a daughter who has no morals and no decency. She does not deserve your loyalty or your sincere love. Forget about her. Happiness will surely come to you." Margaret lowered her head sorrowfully and apologized to Malcolm. Seeing her act that way, Malcolm became alarmed and quickly helped her up. "Mom, please don't do this. You have done nothing wrong. I don't blame Mora anymore, so please don't feel guilty. Even though we won't be husband and wife anymore, I will always see you as my own mother. I hope that one day I will be able to live with you again." Malcolm's words filled Margaret with shame. She was ashamed that she had given birth to Mora but failed to teach her properly. Mora did not deserve the love of a man like Malcolm, a young man with a noble and forgiving heart, a devoted son who honored his parents. Yet her daughter had thrown away years of marital loyalty and affection for the sake of material things. Mora deserved criticism and condemnation, But Malcolm did not do any of that. He did not blame her, nor did he speak a single word of anger. He had accepted letting his wife go so she could pursue a new happiness. The more kind and forgiving Malcolm was, the more ashamed Margaret felt. She was ashamed that she had given birth to a daughter like Maura. Before leaving Malcolm's house, Margaret could only lower her head in gratitude and pray that he would soon find a new happiness. Even though neither Malcolm nor Margaret wanted this to happen, there was no other choice. Malcolm did not want Margaret to leave his home, and Margaret felt the same way. But in the end, even though she did not want to, she had no choice but to leave with Maura. Margaret could no longer stay in Malcolm's house because her daughter and Malcolm were about to divorce, and she no longer had any reason to remain there. The divorce proceedings between Malcolm and Maura were quickly finalized by the court. Maura moved in with her new husband and brought her mother to live with her. Everything seemed as though it would continue peacefully, but only a few months later, Darnell, Maura's new husband, began showing his dissatisfaction toward his mother-in-law. He believed that Margaret still had two healthy sons who were alive and well, yet they were not taking responsibility for caring for her, and were instead pushing that responsibility onto a son-in-law like him. He could not accept that. Many times, Darnell told Maura to take her mother back to her brother's house so that her brothers could care for her. But Maura refused to listen. Frustrated because he could not persuade his wife, Darnell went directly to his brother-in-law's house and said that he was going to send Margaret back to him. At that point, Terence and Monique had no choice but to take Margaret back in. Terence immediately agreed, but Monique said they should wait because she needed some time. And what was she going to do with that time? She was going to organize a family meeting at her house. Following Monique's invitation, Ethan and Nicole had already arrived. The only person missing was Maura. While Terence and Ethan's family sat in the living room drinking tea and waiting to see why Monique had called everyone together, Monique kept pacing back and forth outside, waiting for her sister-in-law. "This Maura is really something. I called and told her about this, and she still isn't here. She won't even answer her phone. It's so irritating." Monique sat down impatiently and spoke. Seeing that her sister-in-law seemed upset, Nicole asked, "Terence, Monique, why did you call us here today? Ethan told me you wanted everyone to come to a meeting, but honestly, I don't know what's going on. You should ask Monique about that. I'm her husband, but I don't know anything either. I'm just sitting here because I was told to be here. I don't get to decide anything." Monique was already irritated, and when she saw Nicole asking questions, she lifted her chin and said, "Actually, it's not a big deal. I was planning to wait until Maura got here before saying anything, but since you want to know, I'll just say it. Maura has been taking care of Mom, but her husband doesn't agree with it. He has hinted several times about sending Mom back here. That's why I invited all of you over so we can discuss what we're going to do about Mom. Is what you're saying true, Monique? Do you think I'm joking? Do I look like a child who jokes about things like this?" Nicole was shocked after hearing what her sister-in-law said. She had been busy with her performances and rarely had time to visit Margaret. She had only heard Ethan say that Margaret was living happily with Maura and Darnell, but she never imagined that she would hear this today. Her mother-in-law was being passed around like an unwanted burden. Unable to hold back her frustration, Nicole turned to Ethan and asked, "Ethan, did you know about this? How could you know that your own mother had been refused by your brother-in-law and still deliberately keep it from me? You're her son. How could you let your mother be treated this way? The truth is, I do care about Mom. But she's old now and difficult to live with. If she came to live with us, she would affect my business and my work. Besides, there's still Terence. He's the oldest son. Taking care of Mom should be his responsibility." Terence had been sitting motionless in his chair the entire time. The truth was that from the moment Nicole asked about their mother, he already felt ashamed of himself for being an unfilial eldest son. But in his family, he lived like a shadow, like a puppet with no real authority. He had no say in family decisions. He couldn't even decide to bring his own mother home and care for her. What could he possibly say? He could only swallow his bitterness in silence. Now, hearing his younger brother mention responsibility, Terence said sadly, "I know I'm the oldest son, but I haven't been able to do anything for Mom. It hurts me to see her suffering at her age, but I don't know what to do. Maybe." Terence turned toward Monique and was about to suggest bringing Margaret home, but Monique immediately cut him off. "Be quiet. Mom is everyone's mother, not just yours. Sit there and keep quiet. I already have a solution. Just wait until Maura gets here and I'll tell everyone." Just as Monique finished speaking, Maura arrived. "I'm sorry I'm late." Seeing her, Monique gave a cold smirk and asked, "What's the reason this time? Or were you trying to avoid responsibility too?" Darnell and I had an argument, that's why I'm late. I wasn't trying to avoid responsibility. Really? He's your husband. You need to know how to keep him in line. Don't let him walk all over you. Mom is everyone's mother. A son-in-law is family too, yet he refuses to take care of her. If he's considered an outsider, then Nicole and I are outsiders too since we're daughters-in-law. I know that. I've tried talking to him, but he won't listen. What am I supposed to do? We can't keep fighting about this forever. Maura burst into tears as she spoke. She never expected Darnell to change so much after the wedding. Before they got married, he had sweet-talked her and told her that her mother was his mother too, and that he would care for Margaret just like his own mother. But after only a few months, his true nature appeared. He constantly showed irritation whenever his mother-in-law was in the house. He complained and made passive-aggressive remarks that hurt Margaret's feelings. Maura had spoken to him many times and told him not to treat her mother that way. But Darnell never changed. Once he had a few drinks, he completely lost control of himself. Seeing Maura sitting there crying, Monique raised her voice. All right, enough. What is crying going to solve now? Here's what I think. Everyone should give their opinion. Mom is everyone's mother. Who is going to take responsibility for taking care of her? I welcome anyone who is willing to volunteer. After Monique said that, everyone fell silent. Nicole nudged Ethan with her elbow, signaling for him to stand up and offer to take Margaret in, but Ethan immediately shot her a sharp look. Several minutes passed before Maura finally spoke. Brothers, sisters, I really do want to take care of Mom. But after what happened between Malcolm and me, Mom is still upset with me. Even if I bring her home, she won't be happy. That's why Darnell gets frustrated. He says that if Mom stays at our house, arguments will eventually happen. Besides, my mother-in-law is already living there. The two families can't live together under the same roof. When Ethan heard his sister speaking through tears, he lost his temper and shouted at her, "Stop it! Quit that crying! This whole situation is your fault. You're the reason Mom ended up like this. Back then, Mom sold her property, and part of that money was used to send you overseas. Now you've come back with some money of your own and you've pushed Mom aside. On top of that, you married that worthless husband of yours. You thought marrying him would give you a better life, but he turned out to be nothing special. He saw your money, said all the right things, and you fell for it. Now you finally realize the truth, but it's too late. If you hadn't left Malcolm, Mom would already have someone taking care of her. And you're criticizing me? When Mom sold her property, didn't most of that money go to you too? How many days did you actually take care of Mom? The moment the money was gone, you started complaining about her, saying one thing after another and looking for excuses to force her out. You're no better than I am. Ethan and his sister argued back and forth, raising their voices. The family meeting turned into a full-blown argument. Nobody was willing to back down. Everyone believed they were right and tried to push the responsibility of caring for their mother onto someone else. After listening to his younger siblings arguing non-stop, Terrence finally lost his patience. Unable to hold back his anger any longer, he slammed his hand down on the table. Everybody be quiet. I've put up with enough from all of you. Monique was startled when she saw her husband lose his temper. Although she felt a little nervous, she still interrupted him. Terrence is right. Everyone stop arguing. The important thing right now is Mom. Who is going to take care of her? After Monique spoke, all the brothers and sisters fell silent. A moment ago, Terrence had been shouting loudly, but as soon as he saw Monique glare at him, he immediately quieted down. In the end, he was still afraid of his wife. His voice changed from loud to soft. Here's what I think. We should take turns. Each of us will take care of Mom for 6 months. Maura is a daughter, so her responsibility is smaller. She can take care of Mom for 3 months. I agree with Terrence's idea. We'll start with your family. Mom will stay with you for 6 months. After that, it'll be my family's turn. Finally, it'll be Maura's turn. Ethan had barely finished speaking when Monique jumped to her feet. No, I don't agree with Ethan's suggestion at all. The busiest season of the year is almost here. I run a business, and everything depends on this time of year. Now you're telling me to bring Mom home. If my business loses money or suffers because of it, who's going to take responsibility for that? Ethan saw his sister-in-law getting angry and immediately glared back at her. How can you even say something like that? Do you think you're the only one who works for a living? You can't avoid this responsibility. You're the oldest daughter-in-law in the family. You should take care of Mom first. Just as Ethan and Maura had been arguing, now Monique and Ethan started arguing as well. The battle over who would take responsibility for caring for Margaret showed no sign of ending. Nicole kept encouraging Ethan to bring Margaret home, promising that she would help take care of her, but Ethan refused to listen. He insisted that he was the son and the husband, and that the decision was his to make. Nicole had no right to interfere. When Nicole continued trying to persuade him to bring Margaret home, Ethan rushed toward her as if he were about to hit her. "Sit down! Have you lost your mind? You want to bring Mom home? Keep your mouth shut right now or I'll slap you." Seeing Ethan about to lash out at his wife, Monique smirked. "Why are you getting so worked up, Ethan? Nicole is a good daughter-in-law. If she wants to bring Mom home and take care of her, you should support your wife's wishes. You need to shut up. You're getting on my nerves. Stop stirring up trouble. You're the oldest daughter-in-law in this family. Is that really how you talk? Well, I'm just saying, if you and Nicole bring Mom home, everyone will praise you as devoted children. As for me, people already think badly of me anyway. All right, here's what I think. Since nobody wants to take Mom first, let's draw lots." Monique's suggestion of drawing lots to decide who would take responsibility for Margaret was immediately supported by everyone. Ethan stood up, got some paper, and made 3 slips. 2 slips were blank, and 1 slip had the word care written on it. Whoever drew the slip with the word on it would have to bring Margaret home first. After the slips were prepared and placed in the middle of the table, Monique drew first. She reached out her hand, then pulled it back. She looked as nervous as someone about to draw a winning lottery ticket. After hesitating for a long time, she finally grabbed one of the slips. Gathering all her courage, Monique took a deep breath and opened it. As she unfolded the paper and looked at it, she quietly prayed for luck. 1, 2, 3, blank. "I got lucky! I got lucky!" Monique looked at the slip in her hand and smiled triumphantly. In her mind, she had successfully escaped the responsibility. After Monique drew her slip, it was Ethan's turn. He eagerly picked up one of the remaining slips and quickly opened it. Almost immediately, Ethan burst out laughing with excitement. As he laughed, he repeatedly slapped his thigh. "I got lucky too. Mine doesn't say care." The 2 blank slips had been drawn by the oldest daughter-in-law and the second son. Only 1 slip remained on the table, and that last slip contained the word care. Maura stood frozen. She picked up the final slip and clenched it tightly in her hand. That meant she would have to take care of Margaret. It wasn't that she didn't want to care for her mother or avoid her responsibility. The problem was that she was trapped in a difficult situation. Darnell didn't want her mother living with them. What was she supposed to do now? What could she possibly do? Crushing the slip marked care in her hand, Maura stood motionless in the middle of the room, silently lamenting her situation. Ever since she suggested bringing Margaret home, Darnell had refused to agree. Nicole sat quietly, watching her husband's brothers and sisters argue over who should take care of their mother, and her heart ached. She felt sorry for her mother-in-law and angry at herself for being unable to change her husband's decision. She pitied the elderly mother who had worked tirelessly her entire life to raise her children, only to receive this in return now that they were grown. Fortunately, Margaret had not witnessed any of this. If she had seen her own children dividing up responsibility for her like this, the heartbreak might have killed her. As Nicole watched the scene unfold before her, she felt a deep sense of fear growing inside her. She feared that one day, if she had children of her own, they might grow up and behave the same way. She didn't know what she would do if that happened. Nicole stood up sadly. She looked at Ethan with disappointment in her eyes before walking away. From that day forward, Nicole and Ethan barely spoke to each other. She could not accept the fact that Ethan was willing to abandon his own mother like that. As for Maura, after returning home from her brother's house, she spent a great deal of time thinking about everything that had happened that day. She wasn't upset because she had been chosen to take care of Margaret. What troubled her was not knowing what to do about Darnell. Now she felt that she had no choice but to keep trying to persuade him to let Margaret stay. Only then would she have peace of mind. After Monique and Ethan drew blank slips and escaped the responsibility of taking care of their mother, both of them felt completely satisfied. They threw themselves into earning money and left the responsibility of caring for Margaret to their younger sister. In their minds, Maura had drawn the slip and therefore the responsibility belonged entirely to her. They casually decided their mother's future for her and treated her as if she were an object. What they did not realize was that Margaret was a human being. She had a heart, and she could feel every bit of the pain and humiliation her children caused her. After returning from Terrence and Monique's house, Maura tried her best to hide everything from Margaret, but Margaret could still see the exhaustion written all over her daughter's face. As soon as Maura walked into her room, she collapsed onto the bed in a daze. Seeing her like that, Darnell spoke in a mocking tone. "So, how did the family meeting go? If you got out of taking care of your mother, you should be happy. Why do you look so miserable? Just stop. Can't you go one day without provoking me? Your mother is still here, isn't she? She didn't leave? What are you talking about? What about your brothers? They're still alive, aren't they? Why aren't they taking care of her? Why are you so determined to keep her here? I didn't volunteer, it just happened. Then why don't you send her back? Lower your voice. Mom might hear you. Why should I lower my voice? Am I saying something that's not true? You're only doing this because of your pride. You insist on keeping your mother here just to prove something to me, don't you? Fine. Then I'll call your brother right now and see what he has to say. After saying that, Darnell stormed outside and pulled out his phone to call Terrence. Maura panicked and immediately ran after him. Margaret had been in the kitchen. When she heard her daughter and son-in-law raising their voices, she followed after them as well. When Darnell called Terrence, the person who answered was Monique. When Darnell asked why Terrence and Monique had refused to take responsibility for Margaret, Monique replied, "Darnell, why are you getting worked up and blaming us? If you want to know why Maura ended up taking care of Mom, you should ask Maura yourself. It was because she drew the slip. She should be happy about getting the chance to take care of Mom." Monique spoke while laughing smugly into the phone. Hearing the triumphant tone in his sister-in-law's voice, Darnell completely lost his temper. He turned around and kicked the leg of a table hard before glaring at Maura and shouting, "Why are you so stupid? They told you to draw a slip and you actually did it. You're a daughter. Why should you be the one taking care of Mom? And if you had to draw, you should have tried to get one that didn't make you take care of her. You're completely useless. You can't do anything right." After saying that, Darnell hurried inside, grabbed his jacket, got into his car, and sped away. Maura stood there watching him leave and let out a bitter laugh. Perhaps she had made a terrible mistake when she chose to leave Malcolm and be with Darnell. She had to end this relationship. She could not accept living with a selfish and heartless man like him. Fortunately, she and Darnell had only been living together and had never officially married, so she could end things with him quickly. Maura wiped away her tears and walked back to her room. She had no idea that Margaret had overheard the conversation between her and Darnell. Margaret was devastated when she learned that her children had literally drawn lots to decide who would take care of her. She had heard stories like that before, but only on television. In real life, she had never believed such things could happen. What kind of children would treat their own mother like an object? Yet the very thing she never believed could happen had now happened to her. Her own children had divided responsibility for her the same way people divide possessions. The more Margaret thought about it, the more bitter she felt. Perhaps she could not stay here any longer. She needed to leave. That way her children would no longer see her as a burden. Carrying her handbag, Margaret looked up at the sky. The sky seemed so high and so far away. Where could she go now? In this vast world, it felt as if there was nowhere left for her to belong. One by one, her children, their spouses, and their in-laws had pushed her away. Her children were now like birds whose wings had fully grown. They could find their own way in life, and the truth was that they no longer needed her. For the entire afternoon, Maura never came out of her room. She stayed inside, packing her belongings and preparing to leave Darnell's house with her mother. Because she was so focused on packing, she never noticed that Margaret had already left. Later that evening, after she finished preparing everything, Maura went to Margaret's room to speak with her, but Margaret was nowhere to be found. Panic immediately set in. Maura contacted her brothers and sister-in-law, asking whether Margaret had gone to any of their homes, but everyone gave the same answer. No one had seen her. Afraid that something terrible might have happened, Margaret's children rushed out to search for her. After checking with relatives, friends, and everyone they could think of, they still found no trace of Margaret. Eventually, they decided to ask the police for help. While waiting for news from the police, Terrence and Monique, Ethan and Nicole, and Maura continued blaming one another. Everyone accused Maura of failing to take proper care of Margaret and allowing her to disappear. Maura was terrified for her mother and devastated by the accusations coming from her brothers and sister-in-law. She seemed on the verge of losing her mind. One moment she was crying, the next she was screaming in despair. Nicole watched her husband's brothers and sisters go from arguing over who should take care of their mother to blaming one another for Margaret's disappearance. Nobody was willing to back down, and the arguments kept erupting one after another. Nicole was sick of watching this family tear itself apart. She took several days off from her performances and, together with Jalen, began searching for Margaret. They were the only two people who were genuinely worried about her. More than a week passed. The police had already issued a missing person notice, but no information had come back. The holiday season was approaching, and Margaret's children felt as though they were sitting on a bed of hot coals. Monique constantly jumped up and down, cursing her husband and Maura for being useless because they still had not found Margaret, forcing her to step away from her business. Ethan claimed he was out searching for his mother, but every time he left the house, he ended up gambling instead. He showed no concern for whether his mother was sick, hungry, or suffering. The people who worried most about Margaret during this time were Nicole and Jalen. Every day, Nicole went to the police station to ask whether there had been any news about Margaret. Then, on the afternoon of December 25, Nicole received a call from the police. They said that a citizen had reported seeing Margaret board an interstate coach bus traveling toward a rural area near the northern border. Unfortunately, that bus had been involved in a terrible accident and had plunged into a deep ravine. Every passenger on board was believed to have died, and no bodies had been recovered because of the dangerous terrain. The shocking news spread through the family immediately. All of Margaret's children followed the police to the accident site to verify the information. At the scene, the only belongings of Margaret that the police were able to recover were her handbag, which contained 2 sets of clothing, and her identification card. According to the police, when the driver realized the bus was in danger, he may have opened the door to allow passengers to escape. During the chaos, Margaret's handbag and many other belongings had been thrown from the vehicle. Before any of the passengers could get out, the bus rolled down into the ravine. Margaret was believed to be among the missing passengers. Holding their mother's handbag and identification card in their hands, Terrence, Ethan, and Maura broke down in tears. They were overwhelmed with regret for the way they had failed their mother. If they had not treated her so badly, none of this would have happened. Maura collapsed onto the ground in agony. Clutching her brother's leg, she cried out, "Mom! Mom is gone! Why did this happen? Why? It's all my fault!" "This is all my fault." Maura lay on the ground sobbing uncontrollably. She truly regretted everything she had done. Because of her, she believed her mother had died. Now that Margaret was gone, where could she possibly go to find her? While Margaret had been alive, her children had pushed her away and treated her like a burden, yet not one of them had ever spent even a single day truly caring for her. She had to take care of her own meals, her own clothes, and even buy her own medicine when she was sick. Margaret's children had always considered those things too small to matter and never paid attention to them. Maura was consumed with regret, but it was too late now. Her mother was gone. No amount of grief could bring her back. Seeing his sister lying on the ground crying in despair, Terrence could not hold back his own tears. He hated himself for being such a useless man. But just like Maura, both Terrence and Ethan knew that their regret came too late. They had no choice but to accept what they believed was the truth. Their mother was dead. After the police finished their work at the accident scene, they handed Margaret's belongings over to Terrence and his siblings. There was nothing else they could do except return home and begin preparing a funeral for their mother. Ever since hearing the news of her mother-in-law's death, Monique had been crying loudly, yet not a single tear had fallen from her eyes. Even so, when Terrence mentioned arranging a funeral for Margaret, Monique's eyes suddenly lit up. "Terrence is right. No matter what, Mom is gone now. You and I should take responsibility for organizing the funeral. Everyone else can just contribute." "Contribute what?" "Mom is dead and they haven't even found her body." "What exactly do you expect us to contribute for? So you can collect money while organizing the funeral?" Ethan immediately objected. "I'm not contributing anything. How can you say something like that? What kind of child refuses to contribute money for their own mother's funeral?" "Mom! Mom! Can you hear what Ethan is saying? He wouldn't take care of you when you were alive, and now that you're gone, he won't even contribute money for your funeral." As Monique spoke, she forced out a few fake tears. Seeing that performance, Ethan exploded with anger. "Shut your mouth. Nobody believes those fake tears of yours. The way you're wailing is ridiculous. Enough." "All of you shut up," Terrence suddenly roared, causing both his wife and his younger brother to fall silent immediately. Everyone got into their cars and headed home. From that moment until they arrived back at the house, nobody dared say another word. Everyone was afraid. Normally, Terrence was a gentle, quiet, and submissive man, but ever since he learned that his mother was believed to have died, he seemed like a completely different person. His face was constantly tense, and his lips were tightly pressed together in anger. He looked frightening. No one knew what he was thinking. All they could see was that something seemed to be burning inside him. He was filled with rage at himself for being too weak and too afraid of his wife to protect his own mother. Because he had allowed Monique to make every decision, his mother had ended up dying in such a painful way. Now his mother was gone, but his failure as a son remained. It was a permanent mark that he would carry for the rest of his life. He did not want to make excuses for what he had done. He only wanted to do something that would allow him to become himself again. He could not continue living as a weak man who was afraid of his wife. Only then could his mother's spirit finally rest in peace without worrying about him anymore. After returning home that day, Terence made a decision. He refused to hold a funeral for Margaret. He said that until her body was found, it meant there was still a chance she was alive. Seeing her husband act this way, Monique thought he had lost his mind from grief and invited relatives and family members over to persuade him that they should hold a funeral for Margaret. But even after everyone arrived, Terence refused to change his position. Not only that, after all the relatives left, he made a declaration to his wife and his siblings. He forbade anyone from saying that Margaret was dead. If he heard anyone say that his mother had died, he swore he would kill them. Seeing Terence standing there with a knife in his hand, Monique turned pale with fear. Although she had wanted to organize a funeral, she was too afraid of her husband to continue pushing the idea. From that moment on, she became completely silent. Ever since learning that his mother had disappeared, Terence drank every day. He wanted to stay drunk so he would not have to face the pain of losing her. And every time he got drunk, he cursed, shouted, and smashed things around the house. If Monique complained or nagged about anything, Terence was ready to beat her. At first, when Terence started hitting her, Monique caused a huge scene. But the more she fought back, the more Terence hit her. Every time he beat Monique, he cursed her. He said that it was because of her that his mother had died, and from that day forward he would make her pay for it. After that, Terence decided to stop working altogether. He left the family business entirely in Monique's hands. Without anyone helping manage things, Monique ran herself ragged but still saw little profit. Not only that, when she came home, Jalen kept his distance from her, while her husband constantly yelled at and beat her. Monique became so discouraged that she gradually neglected her business as well. Many times when Terence beat her badly, she wanted to leave, but she could not bring herself to abandon everything she owned, and she could not bear to leave Jalen behind, so she stayed. A year passed. Life for Monique and Terence continued like that until one day Terence received news from his sister-in-law that Ethan had been arrested on gambling charges. Shocked, he rushed to Nicole's house to see what had happened. Watching Nicole cry over her husband's arrest made Terence's heart ache. He thought about everything that had happened to his family since Margaret disappeared. He and Monique fought every day. His younger brother had fallen into gambling and now was headed to prison. His sister was living alone. Was this the punishment that had come upon their family because they had failed their mother? On his way home from Nicole's house, Terence stopped at a neighbor's place and bought a bottle of liquor. He sat down and started drinking, but today felt strange. He drank half the bottle and still did not feel drunk. Without realizing it, he began talking to himself. Why does this liquor taste so weak today? I've been drinking and drinking, but I can't get drunk. Terence picked up the bottle and stared at it before slamming it down on the table. Maybe it's fake liquor. I'm not drinking anymore. Terence stood up and walked away. He walked without knowing where he was going or what destination he had in mind. He just kept walking. Before he realized it, his feet had carried him to Malcolm's house. It had been a very long time since Maura left Malcolm. Ever since then, Terence had never gone to see him again. He had been too ashamed. Malcolm was mopping the floor when he saw Terence arrive. He immediately ran outside. By then, the alcohol had begun to take effect. Terence staggered as he walked. His tongue felt thick in his mouth, making it difficult for him to speak clearly. Malcolm, is that you? Terence, come inside. Malcolm hurried over, helped Terence, and guided him to a chair. The moment Terence sat down, he burst into tears like a child. Malcolm, I'm hurting so much. I don't want to live anymore. I want to go be with my mother. Terence, you're drunk? Let me take you home so you can rest. Malcolm walked over and tried to help him stand up, but Terence pushed his hand away. He remained seated, crying. Between sobs, he poured out all the pain that had been tearing him apart inside. He regretted losing his mother, and he truly wanted to die. Thinking that Terence was simply drunk and talking nonsense, Malcolm went out to the yard and picked a few fresh lemons to make him a drink to help him sober up. But when Malcolm returned, Terence was gone. Looking around, Malcolm spotted him standing in the kitchen. He immediately ran inside and saw Terence holding a knife against his own throat. It turned out Terence was not drunk at all. He was fully conscious and he truly intended to end his life. Terence, what are you doing? Calm down. Don't do anything reckless. I don't want to live anymore. For more than a year, ever since my mother disappeared, I haven't had a single peaceful night's sleep. I've wanted to stay drunk forever, but I don't understand why today the more I drink, the more awake I feel. Maybe God doesn't want me to be drunk anymore. Maybe he wants me to stay sober so I can slowly feel the pain of an ungrateful son, a man who killed his own mother. I miss my mother, and I want to be with her. Terrence, you can't do this. What about Monique and Jalen? I don't care. She never cared about me anyway. No matter what I said, she never listened. She treated me like a puppet in my own home. She looked down on me. She looked down on my mother. But she regrets it now. What's the point of regret? Can regret bring my mother back to life? Can it bring her back to me? Or am I supposed to live with this shame for the rest of my life? As Terrence spoke, he let out a long breath. The knife pressed harder against his throat, and blood began to run down his neck. I'm leaving. Please take care of Jalen for me. Terrence closed his eyes. The knife in his hand began to move. Terrified, Malcolm shouted, Terrence, stop! Your mother is still alive. Faced with the situation, Malcolm had no other choice. He finally told Terrence the truth. Margaret was still alive. Hearing those words, Terrence froze. The knife slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. He rushed toward Malcolm and desperately begged him to tell him everything. Having no other choice, Malcolm told Terrence everything. On the day Margaret left the house, she boarded an interstate coach bus without knowing where it was headed. That night, the bus stopped so the passengers could use the restroom. Margaret got off as well. However, she had a stomach problem and walked farther away into a wooded area. By the time she returned, the bus had already left. Stranded and alone, she panicked and began walking back down the road. Fortunately, she met a kind young man. After hearing what had happened, he let her stay at his house for the night. The following day, he helped her catch a bus back toward Baltimore. But after returning, Margaret did not go back to her children. Instead, she secretly went to Malcolm's house. She asked Malcolm to take her to Harbor View Senior Living Center. With Malcolm's help, Margaret kept her survival a secret and allowed her children to believe she had died. Margaret made Malcolm promise that he would never tell anyone she was still alive. She planned to spend the rest of her life at the Senior Living Center. But today, faced with Terrence's desperation, Malcolm finally revealed the truth. The moment he finished speaking, the knife fell from Terrence's hand. Terrence quickly wiped away his tears, rushed closer to Malcolm, and begged him to tell him everything once again. With no way to avoid it, Malcolm repeated the entire story in detail. The very next day, Malcolm took Terrence, Monique, Nicole, and Maura to Harbor View Senior Living Center to bring Margaret home. The moment Margaret saw her children, she burst into tears. Her children cried as well. Terrence ran to his mother and wrapped his arms around her. He buried his head against her chest and sobbed like a little child. Monique, Maura, and Nicole rushed forward and joined the embrace. All of them held Margaret tightly. Margaret looked at her children and could not stop her tears from falling. Looking into their eyes, she knew that during the past year since she had disappeared, they had lived with pain, regret, and guilt. They truly regretted what they had done in the past. Because of that, she no longer blamed them. She would return home and continue teaching them the right way to live. Margaret agreed to go home with her children. Since Monique had sincerely apologized and admitted her mistakes, Margaret decided to live with Terrence and Monique. From that day on, Terrence stopped drinking. He happily returned to helping his wife with the family business. Margaret stayed at home and helped her daughter-in-law with meals and household chores. 1 week after returning home, Margaret asked Terrence to take her to visit Ethan. He had been sentenced to 2 years in prison for illegal gambling. When Margaret saw how thin and worn out her son had become, her heart ached. Taking Ethan's hand, she cried and said, "Ethan, I've missed you so much. Work hard, behave well, and come home soon. Mom, I'm sorry. Everything that happened to you was because of me. I regret it so much, but I think it's too late. This is my punishment for not listening to you. If only I had listened to your advice back then. Mom, I'm sorry. Don't cry, son. Everyone makes mistakes in life. What matters is recognizing those mistakes and correcting them. You are only human. Making mistakes is unavoidable. I'm happy because you've realized where you went wrong. From now on, live a good life and never make the same mistakes again." Ethan tightly held his mother's hand and nodded over and over. He truly understood how wrong he had been, yet he also realized that he and his siblings were incredibly fortunate. They were still able to see their mother again. Because the truth was that if Margaret had never returned, they would have spent the rest of their lives drowning in guilt and regret. So, to everyone who still has a mother, Love her and honor her while you still can. Don't wait until you're on the verge of losing her, like Ethan and his siblings did, before realizing the pain and suffering you have caused. As for Maura, after leaving Darnell's house, she rented a small apartment and found a job at a company. Occasionally, on her days off, she would visit her mother's house. One day, while she was there, Malcolm came by. The moment Maura saw him, she felt overwhelmed with shame. She could not bring herself to face him, and always tried to avoid him. Malcolm knew that Maura deeply regretted what she had done. He took the initiative and spoke to her. He told her that he would forgive her if she truly still loved him and genuinely wanted to return to his side. Hearing those words, Maura was moved to tears. She never expected Malcolm to have such a generous heart. He had chosen to forgive all of her mistakes and accept a wife who had betrayed him. "Malcolm, I'm sorry." Maura ran to him and burst into tears. When she heard him say that he was willing to forgive her, she buried her face against his chest and sobbed. "I was a terrible wife. I was blind. You were a good husband and a devoted son, yet I never appreciated you. I let temptation cloud my judgment. Now I'm ashamed of myself. The more forgiving you are, the more ashamed I become. I promise that I will spend the rest of my life loving you with all my heart. Please forgive me. Please forgive this terrible wife." "All right, stop crying. Everything is in the past now." Malcolm gently stroked Maura's hair and comforted her. Maura lifted her head, looked into Malcolm's eyes, and smiled happily. Before long, Malcolm and Maura were living together again. On the day they went to register their marriage once more, Margaret stayed home and asked her two daughters-in-law to prepare a meal so she could light incense for her late husband and celebrate the reunion of her children. Sitting at the dinner table with her children and grandchildren, Margaret watched them laughing, talking, and placing food onto her plate. Her heart overflowed with happiness. The happiness she felt was the same happiness shared by mothers all over the world. It was not a mansion, a luxury car, or a table filled with expensive food. Her happiness came from seeing her children smile. Life is short. Cherish the people you love while you still can. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to support the channel and help me bring you more meaningful stories.